Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When Dan escaped city chaos for a quiet cottage in North Carolina, he expected peace. What he got was war, with a rogue HOA, a clipboard-wielding tyrant named Karen, and a battle for freedom that would turn one man's porch into the front line of suburban rebellion. When I first moved into my new place in North Carolina, I wasn't expecting much beyond the peace and quiet I had been craving for years. After everything that happened in Seattle, the traffic, the stress, the ghost of my wife in every corner of the house, I needed a reset. I found it in the form of a red brick cottage perched on an acre and a half of slightly overgrown land, tucked away on the edge of a town that barely had a downtown. It was perfect. No sidewalks, no streetlights, and more importantly, no HOA. That detail wasn't just a bonus, it was a damn prerequisite. I had been here for 2 months, slowly bringing life back into the house. Weekdays were for remote work, avionics systems don't design themselves, and weekends were for rebuilding the back porch, restoring the garden, and setting up the wood shop in the detached garage. My only regular companion was Max, a rescue mutt with more personality than most people. I didn't really talk to the neighbors. The few times I crossed paths with them, it was the usual Southern courtesy, a nod, a wave, maybe a howdy if we were feeling brave. That suited me just fine. The first letter arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. It was a cream-colored envelope with gold lettering and a logo that looked like someone had tried to reinvent the American eagle using clip art. I almost threw it out as junk mail, but something about the heavy envelope made me pause. Inside was a welcome packet from something called the Wood Hollow Pines Homeowners Association. "Dear resident," it began, "we are thrilled to welcome you to our beautiful community. As a valued neighbor, we invite you to become part of our HOA family." I stopped reading. I flipped through the rest, a pamphlet on neighborhood rules, a calendar of social events, and a form to set up automatic payment for dues. It all reeked of pastel tyranny. I tossed it in the drawer labeled trash I might need someday, and got back to retiling the guest bathroom. A week later came the second letter. This one wasn't pastel. It was bloodless white and carried an unmistakable tone of authority. "You have failed to submit your membership dues," it said. "Total due, $480. Penalty, $50. Payment must be remitted within 15 days to avoid further action." It came with a barely legible copy of what they called historical jurisdiction documents and a printout of a zoning map with a red circle around my house. I reread my deed. Then I reread it again. My parcel was outside the HOA zone. That was non-negotiable. That was why I bought the damn thing. So I put together a tidy little package, a notarized letter of non-affiliation, copies of my deed, parcel map, and a formal cease and desist. I sent it certified mail, return receipt requested. A few days later, I got the green signature card back in the mail. No reply, no acknowledgement, just silence. Fine by me. But things got weirder. I started noticing footprints on the side of the house. Not mine, not Max's, just one set. Deliberate, circling the property line and sometimes stopping at the back deck. I checked the cameras. I had 3 basic motion cams covering the front and back. Nothing conclusive, just a blur, sometimes too far off to trigger the feed. So I upgraded, new cameras with night vision and higher resolution. I wasn't going to let some clipboard warrior start sniffing around my sanctuary. Then came the first face-to-face contact. Sort of. It was dusk. I was out back wiring the new floodlight when Max went ballistic. Hackles up, barking toward the front yard like the mailman had come back with a warrant. I jogged around the side and saw the tail end of someone's beige coat disappearing toward the road. At the foot of my driveway, my mailbox stood open. Inside was a new envelope. No postage, hand-delivered. The same logo as before. This time it read, "Final courtesy notice. Membership in HOA is not optional. Enforcement procedures will commence if no payment is received." That night, I installed motion detectors on every corner of the property and a sign, "Private property. No trespassing, no soliciting. Seriously, don't." I wasn't paranoid. I was just tired of playing defense. Still, in the back of my mind, I wondered what kind of person would think this was normal behavior. Who the hell walked onto someone's property at night to drop off threats in cursive font? I didn't know her name yet, but I was about to find out. It didn't take long for things to escalate. About a week after the last envelope, I started getting mail that looked less like HOA propaganda and more like legal threats, although dressed up in polite fonts and subtle stationery. The next one arrived folded neatly in a manila envelope, slid halfway into my mailbox like the sender couldn't decide whether they were delivering a message or staking a claim. Inside, I found a printed invoice marked delinquent in red and a note at the bottom in cursive script. Non-compliance reflects poorly on the community. Be a good neighbor. That good neighbor line stuck with me. There was something deeply smug about it, the way it reduced legal autonomy to a matter of manners. I knew damn well that I wasn't a member of this HOA. I had bought this house because it was not in a controlled development. My title history was clean, but the letters kept coming. They started listing violations. Apparently, my exterior paint wasn't neutral enough. My lawn had wild patches, and the tool shed I was restoring violated line-of-sight symmetry. I didn't even know what that meant, but I had a strong suspicion it was made up on the spot. I forwarded every single document to my attorney, Erin Scott, who responded after her third email with, "If this persists, I'll file a formal notice of harassment. You're well within your rights." That was mildly comforting. What wasn't comforting was the fact that people were now showing up. Not formally, not openly, but I'd catch them, or rather, Max would catch them, lurking near the edges of my fence, often with a phone or clipboard. One woman even walked up my gravel path and took a picture of the front porch while pretending to jog in place. I waved at her from the window. She bolted like I'd pulled a shotgun. Then came the man in the beige vest. I spotted him one Saturday morning crouched near my garden bed, pretending to inspect the sidewalk cracks. There are no sidewalks on my property. I stepped out onto the porch with my coffee in hand and called out, "You need something? Or are you just doing a botanical survey for fun?" He stood up straight, nodded like he worked for the census, and left without a word. This was all adding up to something. Some kind of amateur surveillance operation. I checked my new cameras every evening and compiled a little video library titled Creeps in HOA. I had clips of people pausing, pointing, even what looked like someone placing a sticky note on my fence gate, which Max promptly ate the next morning. I hadn't said anything to the neighbors, mostly because I didn't know any of them well enough to trust them. That changed one afternoon when I ran into an older man walking his dog, a beagle with a limp. His name was Mark, lived 2 blocks over, and had the hollow-eyed look of someone who'd seen things. HOA things. "You're in Karen's sights," he said without prompting, like we were war buddies. I blinked. "Karen?" He nodded solemnly. "President of the Wood Hollow Pines HOA. She thinks the whole hill is under her domain. You're lucky she hasn't tried to cite you for tree density yet." "That's a thing?" "Oh, she makes things up as she goes. Last winter, she fined a guy for excessively festive Christmas lights. I'm not joking. Had it on paper and everything." I was too stunned to answer. Mark leaned in slightly, his voice lowering. "She walks the neighborhood at night. No flashlight, just a binder. If she thinks you're in her HOA, whether you are or not, she'll act like it's the law. She's got some old friends in the zoning office and a cousin in the sheriff's department, so she thinks she's untouchable." I nodded slowly, my brain connecting a few uncomfortable dots. "So, these letters, that's her?" "Oh yeah, she's like a paper terminator. She doesn't stop, especially if you ignore her." We chatted a little longer, mostly him giving me a crash course in the local flavor of suburban insanity. And I went home feeling like I had just been handed the final boss's dossier before a boss fight. I decided to take the next step. I mailed a formal notice of non-jurisdiction to the HOA's listed P.O. box, this time including a certified copy of my title search, a signed affidavit from my attorney, and a polite note that I would take further legal action if contacted again regarding non-existent obligations. No reply. Instead, 3 days later, I came home to find a large laminated printout zip-tied to my mailbox post. It read, "Community enforcement in progress. Please address outstanding violations." There was no signature, no contact info, just those words in bold Helvetica, like a passive-aggressive billboard. I yanked it off and threw it in the garage. Then I installed a motion-triggered floodlight on the mailbox. I named it Karen Cam. Max seemed to approve. That same evening, as I stood on the porch watching the sun go down, I heard gravel crunch near the side yard. Max growled, low and steady. I turned on the spotlight and caught the faint silhouette of a woman in a windbreaker stepping back into the darkness. She didn't run, just vanished behind the trees. I had had enough. I texted Erin. Me. Can you draft a restraining letter with teeth? I think I'm about to be HOA'd to death. Her. Already working on it. Also, maybe buy pepper spray, just in case. That night, for the first time in years, I locked the interior doors before bed. Just a gut feeling. It was a Wednesday night, just before 11, when the doorbell rang. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Maybe a delivery driver with the wrong address or some kid playing a dumb prank. But then Max let out a growl, not his usual bored woof when a squirrel crosses the yard, but a low, guttural warning that sent a chill up my spine. I reached for my phone and opened the live feed from the front porch camera. There she was, short, stout, wearing a windbreaker zipped all the way up despite the warm night, and holding a thick folder in one hand like it was some sacred scroll. Her hair was pinned into a too-perfect bun. I didn't need a name tag to know who it was. This was Karen. I hit record. She stood perfectly still, staring directly at the camera, then lifted her free hand and rang the doorbell again. The sound echoed through the house like a bad omen. Max paced in tight circles near the door, hackles up. I tapped the intercom. Can I help you? Her eyes lit up like she'd been waiting for that moment all day. Mr. West, I'm Karen Shipley. I'm here to deliver a formal violation notice. As president of the Wood Hollow Pines Homeowners Association, I'm required, legally, to present it to you in person. No, you're not, I said flatly. And this is private property. You need to leave. She raised the folder slightly, as if it were a badge. By Section 14 of our bylaws, hand delivery is authorized and, in some cases, mandatory. You've ignored multiple communications. I wanted to laugh. Your bylaws don't apply to me. We've been through this. You're part of the community whether you admit it or not, she snapped. I leaned closer to the mic. Karen, this is your last warning. Turn around, walk away, and go home. You're trespassing. Her expression didn't even twitch. Instead, she took a slow step back, looked left, then right, and disappeared from the camera's view. I bolted to the back door. I had left it unlocked. Not something I normally did, but I'd just taken the trash out an hour earlier, and habit hadn't caught up with my paranoia yet. Max lunged toward the kitchen with a bark so loud it nearly shook the windows, and then I heard it, the unmistakable sound of a door creaking open. My own back door. I moved fast, not with panic, but with that cold, calculated awareness that hits when you realize you're 1 second from something very stupid turning into something very dangerous. I grabbed my phone, started video recording, and tapped the emergency dial screen. I didn't hit call yet, not until I saw her with my own eyes. She stepped into the kitchen like she owned the place, folder still in hand, eyes scanning the room like she was doing an appraisal. Her cheeks were red, her posture loose. I could smell the alcohol from the hallway. Not just wine after dinner kind of drunk. Full on, I've made bad decisions and will double down drunk. You forced my hand, she said, spotting me in the doorway. I don't want this to be adversarial, but your behavior is unacceptable. You broke into my house. This is not breaking in, she said indignantly. This is formal delivery of notice under community authority. You're drunk. I'm authorized. You're trespassing. She took a shaky step forward. Max growled, standing between us like a furry wall of judgment. I'm going to need you to sit down and listen to the expectations for compliance, she said, pointing at my couch. You have been avoiding this long enough. I held up my phone. Say that again. She blinked. What? Say that again. I want to make sure I get the exact words. You just admitted to entering my home uninvited and issuing enforcement under a code that doesn't apply. Karen looked down at her folder, then at Max, who hadn't moved a muscle. She sighed and lowered herself into the corner of my sofa like she was settling in for tea. I'll wait here until you're ready to be reasonable. I called 911. The operator kept me on the line while I reported an intoxicated intruder. I gave them the address, described the situation, and clarified multiple times that the person was known to me but not welcome, that she was inside without permission, that she was potentially unstable. The operator told me to remain calm and not to engage. I already was calm, that was the problem. Karen continued talking, mostly to herself, muttering about property harmony and architectural consistency. At one point, she tried to stand up and fell back down like gravity had changed its mind. I sat in the recliner across from her, phone still recording, Max still in sentry mode, the room filled with the surreal hum of quiet chaos. I didn't say a word, just watched the countdown on the phone until help arrived. When the flashing lights finally hit my window, Karen perked up. "Oh, good," she slurred. "I was hoping we could get mediation involved." The police arrived fast, faster than I expected for a weeknight in a sleepy North Carolina town. 2 squad cars. One parked in front, the other pulled up onto the edge of my lawn with a crunch of gravel and impatience. The blue and red strobed across my living room like a rave for the emotionally damaged. Karen stood up, or tried to. Her balance betrayed her immediately, and she gripped the armrest like the sofa was trying to escape. Max barked once sharply and sat down again with a huff satisfied. I opened the front door slowly and raised my hand in greeting. The first officer, a younger guy with a face like he'd rather be anywhere else, stepped onto the porch. "Caller's name?" he asked. "Dan West," I said, already holding out my ID and phone. "She's inside, entered without permission, intoxicated, claimed to be delivering an official notice from a homeowners association that I'm not part of." The second officer, older, broader, looked like he was made of rules and bad coffee, nodded. "Weapon?" "Only her voice," I muttered. "And a folder, but you might want to check it for propaganda." They followed me inside. Karen was standing now, barely. Her folder lay open on the floor, pages scattered like confetti at a bureaucratic wedding. Her eyes lit up when she saw the uniforms. "Officers," she said, a little too warmly. "Thank God you're here. This man has been violating community standards and refused all attempts at correction. He's been aggressive, erratic." I feared for my safety. I stared at her. "You walked into my house, Karen." "I'm the president of Wood Hollow Pines," she said, as if that explained everything. "I have authority." The younger officer glanced at me. "Do you have her on camera?" "Multiple angles," I said. "Doorbell, back entry, interior, and audio." She admitted to entering without permission, claimed I forced her hand. "Can we see it?" I handed him my phone. He watched for maybe 20 seconds before letting out a low whistle and passing it to his partner. They exchanged one of those cop glances that says, "Yup, this one's going in the weird file." The older officer turned back to Karen. "Ma'am, have you been drinking tonight?" She scoffed. "Excuse me. I can smell it from here. Would you be willing to submit to a preliminary breath test?" Karen rolled her eyes but nodded. "Fine, let's get this over with. I'm completely within my rights." They brought out the device. She blew. .14. I could practically hear the wheels falling off her world. The older officer's jaw tightened. "Ma'am, you are legally intoxicated and currently trespassing inside a private residence. We also have probable cause to believe you misrepresented yourself as an official agent under false pretenses." "I am an official." "You're not a government officer. HOAs are private entities. You have no legal authority to enter a residence uninvited. You're under arrest." The handcuffs went on before she could formulate another argument. Her folder was still on the floor, face down like even it was embarrassed. She swayed slightly as they guided her out, muttering phrases like community standards and "he's the one who should be fined." The moment the door shut behind them, I let out a long, slow breath. Max hopped onto the couch and immediately took the warm spot she'd left behind. His way of disinfecting the territory. I watched from the porch as they put her in the back of the cruiser. She didn't resist, but her posture was defiant. Chin up, eyes forward, like a martyr being misunderstood by peasants. One of the officers retrieved her folder. He opened it, raised an eyebrow, and flipped through a few pages before handing it to me. "Mostly nonsense," he said. "But we'll need a copy of your footage and a statement. You okay to come down tomorrow?" "Of course," I said. As the cruisers pulled away, one of the neighbors across the street turned their porch light on. Then another. Lights flicked on like popcorn in a microwave, curious heads peeking out through blinds, doors opening a crack, people stepping out into the humid night to confirm that, yes, the neighborhood dictator had just been hauled off in handcuffs. I could feel it. The shift. Someone yelled from 2 doors down. "Was that Karen?" I called back. "Yup." A pause. Then laughter. One guy applauded. I stood there a while, hands in my pockets, watching the silence settle again, like dust after demolition. And in the back of my mind, I knew this wasn't over. Karen was a symptom. There was a whole infection festering under the name of community. But for tonight, she was gone. And I was still standing. By the next morning, the story had spread like gasoline under a match. It started small. I uploaded a 10-second clip to Nextdoor, just Karen entering my kitchen uninvited, waving that cursed folder, slurring something about authority. No commentary, no caption, just the raw video with the title, "Last Night at 10:47 p.m. By noon, it had over 300 comments. By sunset, it had nearly 2,000. Turns out I wasn't the only one with a Karen problem. The messages flooded in. Private DMs, public replies, a few phone calls from numbers I didn't recognize. People wanted to talk. People needed to talk. One neighbor posted a screenshot of his own violation letter. Unkempt mulch bed. Another uploaded a picture of his security cam catching Karen climbing through a hedge into his yard to inspect foliage spacing. But the worst came from a woman named Valerie. She posted a blurry image of Karen standing in her driveway at 9:30 p.m. with a flashlight, shining it into her living room window. The caption, "She said she was checking for unauthorized blinds." I nearly spat my coffee. Valerie added that Karen had once left a handwritten note threatening her with a fine if she didn't trim her rose bushes to a more geometrically harmonious shape. That was her phrase, direct quote. Then came a post from a man named Luis, who claimed Karen had filed a non-compliance alert because his mother, who was visiting, parked on the street for 2 hours. He attached a copy of the letter, complete with time-stamped photos and a warning that excessive visiting hours attract crime. People were pissed, but more than that, they were relieved. Relieved that someone had finally caught her, not just in the act, but undeniably, legally, publicly. The local Facebook group lit up too. A former HOA board member came forward anonymously, claiming he'd resigned 6 months ago because Karen had turned the HOA into her personal surveillance squad. He said she kept a binder titled Watch List, full of notes on families, license plates, schedules, even dog names. By early afternoon, a reporter from the local paper reached out. She wanted an interview. Her name was Tasha Wu. Sharp voice, sharper questions. We met at the cafe in town. I brought my copies of everything. She brought a digital recorder and the quiet thrill of someone who knew a story was about to blow wide open. "Is it true," she asked, "that she entered your home while intoxicated?" "She came through the back door like it was her kingdom," I said. "Sat on my couch and lectured me on shrub symmetry." Tasha blinked. "Did you make that up?" I wish I had. The article went live that evening under the headline, "HOA President Arrested for Breaking and Entering. Neighbors Allege Pattern of Abuse." And that was the moment the dam broke. More neighbors came forward. Stories piled up. One woman claimed Karen had threatened to report her to Child Protective Services because her son played basketball too loudly after 7 p.m. Another man said she demanded he remove his American flag because it clashed with the neighborhood's neutral tones. And then came the real smoking gun. A teenage boy posted a photo of Karen outside the HOA clubhouse 2 nights before the incident. She was holding a bottle of Chardonnay and flipping off a garden gnome. That image became a meme within hours. "Gnome Rule Enforcement Squad," someone captioned it. I didn't laugh. Okay, I laughed. The next morning, a follow-up article hit the paper. Community in revolt. Wood Hollow Pines HOA under fire for years of overreach. The reporter had dug deep. Found receipts, meeting minutes, even proof that HOA funds were spent on things like executive refreshments and personal outreach wine tastings. Subtext, Karen was getting buzzed on HOA money. And then came the one thing no tyrant survives, the audit. The county announced a preliminary investigation into financial misconduct. The HOA's bank statements were subpoenaed. The board, silent at first, issued a generic statement about cooperating with the authorities and respecting due process. But people weren't buying it. Not anymore. Neighbors began organizing, not in secret, not in whispers, but openly. Someone printed flyers. Accountability meeting, Thursday, community center, bring your stories. Another offered to live stream it. And me? I spent that night on my porch, Max at my feet, watching the floodlight cast long shadows over the fence. The yard was quiet. No silhouettes, no rustling, just a gentle breeze and the soft flick of bugs hitting the bulb. I had a feeling it was the calm before the real storm. If Karen thought one night in county lockup would earn her a slap on the wrist and a return to power, she was in for a very sober awakening. Within 48 hours, she was charged with 3 misdemeanors and 1 felony: unlawful entry, public intoxication, impersonating an officer of the law, and attempted coercion under false authority. Her mugshot leaked. Eyes glassy, bun lopsided, still wearing the windbreaker like it was armor. Someone online added the caption, "All hail the Queen of Paperwork." But this wasn't just about Karen anymore. The homeowners association she ruled like a micro-dictator was starting to crack at the seams. Officially, the HOA issued a statement claiming Karen acted in a personal capacity outside the scope of her elected duties. It was a weak attempt to distance themselves, but it backfired instantly. Former board members began speaking out, and some residents were already digging through HOA meeting transcripts like forensic accountants on a mission. The rot wasn't just about Karen breaking into houses, it was financial. Turns out, under her leadership, the HOA had been spending money on administrative necessities that included liquor store receipts, catered dinners for board cohesion nights, and rental cars used for field inspections, which apparently meant driving around the neighborhood at night, taking pictures of people's lawn decorations. A line item labeled Executive Beverage Fund popped up repeatedly. No one could define what that meant, but people sure had guesses. My attorney, Erin, got involved in the legal fallout. She helped organize a collective complaint from residents, a class action filing alleging misuse of HOA funds, harassment, and intimidation. I signed on to it. So did over 20 other property owners, some reluctantly at first, but with each new story, each bank statement, each casual horror tale, they joined. The county scheduled a hearing. Karen, under house arrest and wearing an ankle monitor, tried to release a statement through her lawyer. It was 3 pages of victimhood and delusion, claiming she had been pushed to extreme measures due to a coordinated campaign to undermine neighborhood standards. She described herself as a guardian of harmony and invoked phrases like moral authority and civic responsibility. The court didn't buy it. During the preliminary hearing, the prosecutor laid out the charges methodically, referencing video footage, mine, incident reports from at least 4 households, and financial documentation showing over $12,000 in untraceable HOA expenses. That number turned more than a few heads in the courtroom. The judge, a tired-looking man with a mustache built for scowling, raised an eyebrow and muttered, "12,000? For what? Vintage community spirit?" Karen's attorney tried to downplay her actions as a lapse in judgment. The judge didn't blink. By the end of the session, Karen accepted a plea deal. She would avoid jail time in exchange for 18 months of supervised probation, mandatory enrollment in alcohol rehabilitation, a civil penalty of $12,000 in restitution to the HOA, though the HOA was now being investigated separately. And, most importantly, a permanent ban on holding any HOA or community leadership position in the state of North Carolina. That last clause was poetic. They didn't just dethrone her, they salted the earth. Meanwhile, the HOA board held a closed-door emergency meeting. The minutes leaked the next day. Half the board members were resigning. The treasurer had vanished. One member, who apparently just wanted to organize bake sales, submitted a resignation letter written entirely in caps lock and exclamation points. The rest of the neighborhood was in full rebellion. A petition began circulating to dissolve the HOA entirely. State law allowed it with a 2/3 vote from property owners. Flyers appeared on every mailbox. No more HOAs, no more tyrants. It's our hill now. I watched the dominoes fall with a strange mix of satisfaction and disbelief. Karen had kicked in my door, metaphorically and literally, but what she ended up breaking was the whole damn system. And yet somehow I had the feeling it wasn't over. Not until someone officially pulled the plug. The death of an HOA doesn't come with sirens or celebrations. It comes with paperwork, silence, and the collective sigh of a neighborhood finally exhaling after years of artificial tension. Within a week of the hearing, the petition to dissolve the Wood Hollow Pines Homeowners Association reached critical mass. People signed it at cookouts over fences on their lunch breaks. One neighbor even set up a folding table near the community center with a sign, "Sign here to evict Karen's ghost." There were donuts. The final vote wasn't even close. Nearly 75% of homeowners supported the dissolution. That was more than enough under state law. By the end of the month, the HOA was officially terminated. Not suspended, not restructured, but put down like an old rabid dog. The office shutters were pulled. The HOA's website, previously filled with warnings, guidelines, and passive-aggressive fonts, redirected to a blank page with a single line. This domain is no longer active. The clubhouse was padlocked. The community email address stopped responding. The last remnants of official power evaporated, and what rose in its place was uncertain, but better. In the void left behind, something unexpected started to grow. A small group of residents, not self-appointed, not power-hungry, just tired of the circus, began meeting informally. They didn't call it a board. They didn't collect dues. They didn't use phrases like compliance or aesthetic harmony. They just talked about potholes, about landscaping help, about organizing a spring cleanup. It wasn't governance, it was cooperation, and people liked it. Marta, the woman with the rose bushes, brought lemonade to the first gathering. Luis grilled hot dogs. Valerie made a spreadsheet for sharing tools. Someone suggested setting up a communal shed near the old clubhouse for lawn equipment and gardening supplies. No voting, no shouting, no citations, just neighbors trying to live like neighbors again. I wasn't a joiner by nature, never had been, but even I found myself showing up to a few of the meetings. Not to talk, just to sit on the grass with Max, sip coffee, and occasionally throw in a dry joke when someone suggested we start a newsletter. Only if it's printed on toilet paper, I offered once. It got a laugh. Meanwhile, my own house had become something of a landmark. People referred to it as Karen's Last Stand, or sometimes the red house that broke the system. One guy even asked if I'd consider putting up a small plaque. I didn't, but I did mount a new sign on the front gate. Private property, no HOA entry, especially not after 10 p.m. It became a meme. People took selfies with it. One couple said they were going to make t-shirts. I didn't mind. After everything, a little humor felt like a relief valve. I'd also taken steps to reinforce the property. Proper motion lights, a reinforced fence, and a smart intercom system that auto-recorded every visitor. Not out of fear, but because I'd learned the hard way. Peace is worth protecting. Erin stopped by once just to check in. You know, she said, sipping from a travel mug, this could have gone way worse. Oh, I'm aware. You could have ended up being the paranoid new guy no one talks to. Instead, I'm the guy who accidentally launched a suburban revolution. She smiled. North Carolina thanks you for your service. Max barked once, which we decided counted as applause. In the weeks that followed, I got back to normal. Or rather, I discovered a new version of normal. The garden grew, the wood shop stayed busy, and Max finally stopped growling at every shadow. The quiet returned, but now it wasn't the kind of quiet that warns you something's coming. It was the kind that says, you made it. People still knocked on my door now and then, but not with violations. They brought jam, or wanted advice on fencing, or just wanted to shake the hand of the guy who stood up and said no when everyone else had been too tired or too polite. I never asked for that role. I still didn't want it, but I accepted it, because sometimes the only way to stop the slow rot of petty tyranny is to let one woman crash headfirst into your living room, and then record everything. It was late fall when I finally let myself believe that it was over. The trees had started to turn, that deep, honey gold kind of orange that made the sky look like an oil painting. I was sitting on the porch with Max, a mug of black tea steaming in one hand, the other idly scratching behind his ears. The house was quiet. No threats, no strange letters, no HOA minions hiding in the hedges with clipboards. Just quiet. Freedom had a texture now. Not just the absence of noise, but the presence of calm, the kind you feel in your bones. The last loose end tied itself up quietly. A week ago, a county official delivered the final audit summary of the now-defunct HOA. It confirmed misuse of funds, lack of transparency, and what the report called systemic overreach with no legal grounding. Karen's actions weren't just aberrations. They were symptoms of a diseased structure built on unchecked power. No one cried when the clubhouse was sold at auction. A landscaping company bought it for cash and converted it into a tool rental depot. Kind of fitting, honestly. Karen didn't appeal her sentence. Last I heard, she'd moved out of the neighborhood, sold her house to a young couple with a baby and a pug. They painted the shutters a bright seafoam green. Karen would have had a heart attack. No one threw her a going-away party. I sometimes wondered if she looked back at the hill she once ruled like a kingdom. I wondered if she understood what she'd done, not just to me, but to the community she claimed to protect. Somehow, I doubted it. People like her rarely see the full picture. They only see violations. But I wasn't angry anymore. Honestly, I wasn't much of anything about her anymore. Life had moved on, and so had I. The new informal committee kept things running, but there were no power grabs, no surveillance, just neighbors helping neighbors. A shared ladder here, a community garden there, a newsletter someone actually printed out and delivered by hand, filled with corny jokes and casserole recipes. I even helped build a little free library at the end of my property. Max supervised. My workshop was finally finished. I'd installed a full bench setup, an air filtration system, and even started taking small orders, handmade cabinet doors, carved signage, custom frames. Working with my hands helped. It gave shape to the time that had once been eaten by anxiety. The video of Karen's midnight intrusion was still floating around online. Occasionally, someone would stumble onto it and message me, "Dude, you're a legend. Is this real? You should sell the movie rights." I never responded, because that night, as absurd and terrifying as it was, didn't define me. What did define me was this moment. Me, on my porch, dog beside me, watching the wind move through the trees on land that was mine. Uncontrolled, unclaimed, undisturbed. The sign on my gate still hung where I first drilled it in. The paint had faded a bit, but the message remained crystal clear. Private property. No HOA entry, especially not after 10 p.m. It wasn't just a warning anymore. It was a relic, a joke, a line in the sand that would never need to be drawn again. Max sighed and leaned his weight against my leg. Sunset rolled in, soft and gold and honest. And for the first time in a long damn time, maybe ever, I felt completely, irrevocably home.